Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larsen. This is a new mini-series on the show we're going to be doing. I've got a few different folks that have asked to interview me, and so we're starting off with our first one. It's kind of a Ask Me Anything type of style. Rory Hochstein and I have known each other for quite a number of years and have reconnected more lately. And so I said, I'm going to turn it over to him and see what he wants to talk about. Roy spent a lot of time in operations, most recently in franchising, and is just starting some new, exciting things in his life with some entrepreneurs that go out and buy businesses and ramp them up. So Rory, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and maybe just start with a little bit. Go back to how we first met each other and your thoughts from that, and then jump into whatever you want.
100%. Appreciate it, Jess. So yeah, like I remember about 2012, I think it was, Heather Burton, a mutual friend of our's, invited you to come speak at a youth leadership education camp called LYR. And you were essentially the keynote speaker for that event. And I was still like very, very fresh, new in entrepreneurship. But I still remember when you came, you had a stack of books, I think, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 12 there. And you just spoke about your journey of how being able to be exposed to entrepreneurs and their ideas and investing. And I still remember as you were talking and sharing how you achieved your first million and how you're like, it's been such an awesome experience to build my own skateboard park in my backyard. And I remember my mind just blew. Like, I was like, this dude can build skate parks in his backyard. And so I was just like immediately just thrown back. And then you gave some kind of like invitation challenge to everyone. Like, if you read all these books, I will take you out for lunch. And inside I was like, I'm getting that lunch. Let's go. And so, just wrote down all the books, got copies of all of them. And then I still remember, I can't remember how, I think I got your number through Heather, and I just rang you up. It's like, hey man, I read all the books. You're like, sweet, come on in. You were in your investment offices in Calgary. And I just remember just this total paradigm shift walking in. It was like one of the nicest offices I ever saw. I can't remember if everything was marble, but it looked like it. And we just had a great conversation. And I just remember just the way that you opened up my mind to different possibilities with entrepreneurship and even just thinking in general. And I was like, wow, he's operating at a different level. To a little bit, you felt like, to me, like you're from a different planet, but in the greatest way possible. Like, I want a ticket on whatever rocket ship he got on. I want to go hang out with these people. And so that's kind of like what really, part of the theme of the conversation I'm interested in exploring with you is that, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so that introduction into, not only with you, but other entrepreneurs through their books and these ideas to be able to access just a different way of thinking, like a higher level. Like, I'm sure it's like, when you go out snowboarding and you watch a guy do like a cool trick and you're just like, hey, I didn't know you could do that. Like, and then your mind starts racing like, hey, what can we do? So that's kind of like how it started at the beginning. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on to that or.
No, just that, like, every time I feel down about myself as an entrepreneur, I'm going to call you and get you to tell that story. Cause like, I wish all those things were true. And so like that, this is like an ego boost. So it's very nice of you to say. I don't know if I quite feel all those things, but I appreciate it either way. Well, let's jump into it. What do you want to ask?
Yeah. So, I ran into this challenge, just a few months ago, and it was part of what prompted the phone call for us to get together, which is, I was looking for a new opportunity, felt like I kind of reached the ceiling of where I was at professionally in my career. And one of the biggest problems I realized that surfaced was like, I know I have an awesome skill set. I know I have a lot to contribute to businesses, but I'm largely invisible. Like I don't, or at least that's how I felt initially. It's like, nobody really knows who I am. And so I remember my initial question to you was like, how do you effectively go out and network with people? And then you gave some amazing ideas. So I really am inspired, and it's, part of my my 2024 goals is to start a show similar to you. And so I'm really curious, part of what sparked the idea behind, just to dive in deeper with you, like on this conversation, what sparked the idea for you to start that podcast, as a podcast now on the show that it is, and what was really the vision behind that and how it's evolved over time?
Yeah. I mean, my first piece of advice is, if there's any event or anything that's called networking, you may as well skip it. It's just going to be people pushing sweaty business cards into each other's hands. Like, that's not where real relationships are made. So skip those. I think there's a couple of questions wrapped up there. I'll just say it this way. Like, I had my own personal roller coaster of personal net worth, way up, way down, way up, way down, these kind of things. And in some ways I felt like I was starting over again after my last major dip. Right. And, we'd moved to a new city, and I felt like I was kind of starting over in a bunch of ways. And so, just this idea of like, there's this great quote that Jim Collins' mentor gave him, and I believe it's in Good to Great, or maybe it's in Great by Choice, but his mentor talked to him about this idea of that maybe he wanted to change strategies. And instead of working so hard to be interesting, that he should work harder to be interested. And his mentor felt like that would serve him better. And, there's a lot of people in business who kind of look down their nose on the 100-year-old book, How to Win Friends and Influence People from Dale Carnegie.
Sure.
But I'll tell you, some of the most connected, most influential people I know come from like FBI counterintelligence or CIA case officers or something. They swear by that book. They're like, that book works. Like, some of the stories are dated. Some of the things in there are somewhat cheesy, but the principles behind it are some like the most effective things ever written kind of stuff. And Warren Buffett does not have his degree from Columbia University on his wall in his office. He has his Dale Carnegie certificate from taking the class on his office wall. And my grandpa, who is my hero in Raymond, Alberta, not far from where you're at, he made every one of his 65 grandkids feel like their special grandkid. And he was he's a self-made millionaire in a little farm town of 3,000 people and made his money in town, right? And was a community leader. Just like if I ever grow up, I'm hoping to be Jim Bridge. Like that's my goal in life, right? And he loved this book. And I give you all that premise to say why that book means so much to me. But there's this line in there where Dale Carnegie says, like, you can make I don't know. I can't remember the number right now. It would be way better if this quote was on the tip of my tongue. But basically, he felt like you could make friends way faster by being interested in them instead of getting them interested in you. And I thought, I've got some friends who have accomplished some big things in life. One of them is my good friend Lindsay Hadley. She started our charity Child Rescue for us. She was our first executive director. She's gone on to advise clients like Hugh Jackman's wife and Kevin Bacon and these different billionaires with their charities. And she is great at attracting these giant clients to the private wealth management firm Capita that she's at now. And I've watched her raise millions of dollars for charities where she gets like somebody rich, somebody famous, and the press in the same room, and they all want to meet each other, right?
That's awesome.
And then Lindsay's like so smart, absurdly friendly, very hardworking, and she gets invited to things even beyond her efforts because of who she's associated with, right? And because she's 1 degree of separations from billionaires and celebrities. And, I'm an audiobook nerd. I'm an audio nerd in general. I'm always listening. Like, I watch YouTube, but I listen to YouTube as much as I watch it. Like, I'm always got some keynote speech or some podcast on, right? And I feel like I didn't need a crystal ball to say, like, hey, if I'm going to get back in the investment business and I'm going to have a fund eventually, like, it probably wouldn't hurt to dig my well before I'm thirsty and make friends with a bunch of wealthy and high profile people before I need investors, before I need press for my next fund. And in fact, no matter what business I start next, how could it be a negative to have a bunch of, millionaires, billionaires, celebrities on speed dial, right? And then there's just like the eternal learner in me who just like actually thinks it's fun to learn from these people.
Oh, totally.
And so this idea of like, can I give them free press? Can I do them a favor? Whatever it is they're trying to get attention for, call them up and say, hey, can we, I'd love to give you free attention for that thing you're trying to get attention for. Like, they're paying their PR firm 10 or 20 grand a month to try to find opportunities like this. It's a gift to show up and offer it to them. And then if I can actually shut up and listen to them and let them talk for at least 70% of the conversation, that's another gift. Stay in touch afterwards, call in favors for them, send them a book, make connections. Like I call in a favor of somebody else I know that could actually help them and say, hey, can you do me a favor and help this person? And we started doing these private parties where we invite a bunch of our highest profile guests to come meet each other, but we don't charge them to be there. There's no sales, there's no fundraising. It's like just a gift. Hey, I hope, come meet with 50 high profile people and I hope you find somebody who can help you with your business. And it's like, it's turned into genuine friendships, and some of them become clients, some of them give them referrals, and lots of them will never be a client or give me a referral. But it actually just like improves my quality of life to have friendships with these crazy people that are inventing the future, and like they give me advice and they ask me for advice. And it's like, I think when I started, I didn't realize how meaningful that would end up being in my life. And there's like all these financial benefits from millionaires become investors in my investment fund, CEOs buying podcasts from us where we make a show like my show for them, large family offices supporting our charity, Child Rescue Association. And that's all great. But funny enough, it's like the internal, like psychological, like the friendship, like the affirmation of like, oh, these people I really look up to are encouraging me on this, but also telling me maybe I need to question myself on that. And it's I don't know, it's like addictive to have deep connections with people I wish I knew.
Wow. Yeah. I relate like in so many respects. Actually, the first book, it's a personal development book my dad ever gave me was How to Win Friends and Influence People. So as soon as you start talking about that, so many like flood of memories and just like very basic things. But yeah, like in one of your recent LinkedIn posts, I saw you had a phrase in there. I think it was the "What's in it for me" nurture plan, as far as these relationships are concerned, and that really caught my attention because you're very intentional about your relationships. It's not just like, oh, you were on the show and one and done sort of thing. Maybe you can share a little bit about like why that intentionality and where it's led to, as far as just, I mean, you mentioned a few examples there. I'm just curious to kind of know like what's been the net effect as you've continued to nurture these relationships.
Yeah. I mean, my analogy for that, I call it the friendship orchard.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Where it's like you meet people and you do a favor for them. You reach out to somebody and invite them on the podcast. Whatever it is, like I think of it as like planting the seed for a friendship tree, right? And the trick is to water and fertilizer, stay in touch, do them a favor, send them a book, email them an article that would matter to them. Do the things that a real friend would do, not that a salesman would do, right? Like salesmen might do like a couple of things, and then if you don't buy soon enough, they give up. Like, don't give up on people. Be friends with them for the long term, whether they buy or not, okay? And you just keep water and fertilizing the friendship tree. And if you start enough of these, you don't need any one of them to bear fruit, right? And if you use the 80-20 principle, Pareto principle, and you're intentional about like who you're choosing to invest in, right? But then you don't invest in them like it's a transaction. You just actually become friends. So they're like, hey, if any of these trees bear fruit, it will be worth it, right? And then you do the reverse, and you look behind you. Like, I guess I'm just so grateful to the kind of people on my show who take time, these millionaires and billionaires that basically are teaching me business. And that's happened long before I started my show. So many people like took pity on me and said like, here, Jess, this is going to make things go faster for you. And gave me a leg up, right? And it's like the whole pay it forward principle of like, you got the friendship orchard of like trees that you think will bear fruit and help feed your family, right? And you stay in touch and become a friend and Some of them I do better at, and some of them I don't do as well at. And some of them have shriveled up and died because I had a good start, and maybe I had a couple follow-ups, and then the years went by and I just didn't stay in touch, and we're not really friends, you know? But you got that side, and then you got the like look behind you and like, you know, have a little gratitude for everybody who's paved the way for us.
Totally.
And, you know, when somebody says, you know, even when you're the CEO of a private equity fund, somebody says, hey, can you come do a keynote speech to a bunch of youth? By the way, there's no budget. Like, this isn't a paid speaking gig. You just say yes every time, you know? And when you meet young people who are trying to do something, you know, like trying to help them skip unnecessary pain and tell them what worked for you, or tell them what book can help them, or tell them what podcast episode can help them, or whatever. And it's kind of like the friendship tree behind, where the fruit, the fruit that's going to come out of it is for them. You know, it's not for you. It's not going to make any money for your business. Like investing in people who can't do anything for you. And I say can't do anything for you, but it's not really true. The good feelings that come from it are incredible payment. To like have actually done something that mattered and help somebody accelerate getting where they want to go, it's like deeply satisfying. So there's nothing financially in it for myself. But it is actually super psychologically gratifying. Like even what you said to start this interview was like, it's fun. It's fun to
So
feel
much
like
fun.
you were able to help someone.
100%. Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say just because of that single interaction, that idea that, oh, I can find books, and I don't even know at this point, like I've probably read hundreds of business books. Largely your influence was like, oh, I can change my future by changing the ideas that I expose myself to. And, you know, this whole entrepreneurship world, and maybe I'm just naive, but it was largely like a Disneyland experience for me. I just walked into it one day and I was like, who are these people like that are performing and believing in these goals and dreams that were like so far outside of the scope of what I was mentally taught how to think in a public school system, that it was just like, it's like setting off dynamite in my brain. As far as like, maybe it was a Matrix type of experience, who knows, throw whatever metaphor you want, but it was fun because it was like, no, somebody dreamed up that idea and they were influenced by certain people. And so to rub shoulders, you know, with you or other entrepreneurs along the way, it's like you said, it's fun to be able to serve people in a way where, you know, that like my life is forever changed. My wife's life's impacted. She's started her own tons of little mini businesses, and we always have these little business chats, and she's evolving over time, where she's like getting started this social dance group, and there's like 40 people in like Cardston coming in and having like a social dance experience together, and it's so much fun, you know. So it's like the ripple effect of, you know, being able to connect people together. So yeah.
Can I follow up something that I left out of that previous answer?
Of course.
One thing is, if you do something where you can start enough new friendships, then you never get tempted to like pull on the tree to make it grow faster, right? To try to get a sale or to try and get a client early. You can just do favors and do favors and do favors and have faith that you're gonna harvest what you plant at some point, right? And you don't need any one tree to work out, because, you know, if you do a weekly podcast, you like start 50 new friendships a year, right? And it's like something will work out somewhere, right? Just use the 80-20 principle, be smart, you know, invest in the right people, but then really invest in a non-transactional way. And it's actually like pushing the easy button, because you're not trying to get anyone. You're actually just trying to serve them. You're trying to serve them so much that you get this reputation, and that you create real friendships, and then friends do things that real friends do, and they give you a referral, they give you advice, they give you a contract, they just give you friendship too. And it's I want to go back even earlier to something you're bringing up about like having people find out. Like, obviously a lot has happened in the last 11, 12 years since we met, right? To the point where
Totally.
you become enough of an operations professional that guys who can buy entire companies have recruited you to come help them, make them efficient and really hum, right?
Totally.
But most entrepreneurs' problems, I mean, there's so many kinds of problems, but one of the biggest problems for most entrepreneurs is not the competition, as normally thought about. The competition isn't the other people who do stuff like you, okay? The biggest threat most entrepreneurs have is anonymity. People don't know who you are, right? It's extremely hard for them to, this idea of like people need to know, like, and trust you, right?
Totally.
It's so hard for somebody to like you long enough to get to the point where they trust you if they never heard about you in the first place. And we've all been around those self-promotional people who drive us nuts, just constant name dropping and constant self-promotion, and they can steer any conversation back to themselves, right? And in an effort not to be like that person, in my estimation, most entrepreneurs go too far the other direction, and people don't even know what they've done at all, right? And so, I mean, the magic about the podcast and parties strategy is you put these people on your podcast who are going to get a lot more attention than you. And so people tune in for this high profile CEO, pro athlete, movie star, whoever it is. They tune in for that person, and then they find out about you by accident. And if you are the kind of interviewer who is genuinely interested in your guest and listening to their last answer and then asking a question about the last answer, instead of doing the like bobblehead reporter thing of like, question, thank you for that answer. Question number 17, does it? And not, they're like wooden, right? If you actually have a conversation and it's apparent to that guest that you're genuinely curious in them and their answers, and you're digging, you're like an investigative journalist, right? They love that. When you turn the camera off, they're like, that's a great interview. Usually people like machine gun me with these questions, but like, this was really fun. Like, you're good at this. And it's like, all you do is be curious. Be curious. And this is the hard part for me, is shut up, because I'm hardly ever the guest, like right now. I'm usually the interviewer. So like making sure that they get to say what they want to say that's why the listener tuned in, right? But that 15 to 30% of the conversation that you, the host, are talking, now the listener does find out about you. And if this interview was great because the guest was you were having a good time because you were asking what you were really curious about, not just what you thought the audience would want to hear about. The guest is having a good time because they can tell you like them and you're curious to them. Then the listeners are having fun. The listeners are like, well, I wonder who else they interviewed.
Right.
Every time we get some like mega interview that gets like thousands and thousands of people listening to it, my old shows get lots of listens.
Interesting.
And what's happened is we've got a bunch of new listeners who tune in for that episode for the guest, and they're like, there's something about the interview they wanted to know who else I talked to, and they start going through my old shows. And like to the point, like I remember having people come on and say, I've done like over 900 interviews now, right? But
100%.
Like I meet people sometimes who are like, oh yeah, I started, my first interview I heard of yours was number 350. So I just went back and listened to all 350 of your previous ones, Jess. It's like, really? Right? And they awesome. They get hooked. It's like me, like, I'll watch every Jack Ryan show that ever comes out on Amazon Prime. Like we get into our things, right?
Totally.
And what's funny is they end up finding out quite a bit about me, even if I'm only talking 15% of the conversations over the course of a year or years, right? And any CEO can do this. Any entrepreneur can do this. Have a show. You don't have to hire a firm like Greystoke Networks to get the ultra premium guests if you can't afford it. I couldn't afford it myself when I started, right? I started with the best guests I could get, and I worked my way up and worked my way up and worked my way up over time. And now we've got high-profile CEOs who are like, I don't want to work myself up over time, Jessica. I'll just pay you guys, and you guys start me out with the premium guests, right? Cool. But anybody can start with the highest profile people they know, and then they can usually get somebody just a little bit better than the last one. And it solves the anonymity problem because people, you start posting these clips to your LinkedIn and all over your social media. You let YouTube figure out who your listeners are, and they bring you more listeners, right? And you could solve the anonymity problem. Once people know who you are, you can potentially move on to getting them to like you enough to eventually trust you. And that's not rocket science either. Just help. Like, Gary Vaynerchuk's book, Jab, 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 Right Hook?
Yes.
He wanted to have it say 7 jabs. Jab, 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 right hook. Okay? And like my version, so his whole premise is like, keep giving, don't be selfish. Don't ask for the sale all the time. Give, teach, right? And my version of that is like, give until it hurts a little. Like, don't give until it hurts a lot, because then you'll resent people. But like, give a little more than you really feel 100% comfortable. Like, outgive the competition. Teach as much as possible. It earns reciprocation. It earns goodwill, and it's just doing good for people.
Wow. Yeah, that very last piece that you said, like giving to where it hurts a little, is just like, it's shaking up my paradigms a little bit. And I really loved how you blended into just that very intentionally wanting to serve, wanting to give. And not only, I mean, the feelings that you get from it are amazing, but also just because it's fun to give. It's fun to give an impact. If there's a way we can alleviate any kind of unfairness or delay that's happening in somebody's life, then it's like, even just my daughter, she made this like little poster one time, and I just shared with her some little simple marketing principles. And it was like, make sure you have the dollar, the price amount, make sure you have a call to action. And it was just beautiful. It was just like, one of the cutest posters with like all these little marketing things. It's like, I would buy, and it's like, it's just, yeah.
If you still have that poster, you should take a picture and post it to LinkedIn and tell that story. On LinkedIn, saying something personal and something specific or actionable goes really well. Just reposting a news article doesn't do much for you. But something personal like that it has a real chance to catch on.
Wow. Okay. I'll see if I can dig it up.
And I wish I could take more credit for my whole like the friendship orchard analogy.
Sure.
Okay. But it's mentorship. I was lucky enough when I was like 29. My brother and I and our partner John were running an energy fund, and we invested we were lucky enough we were co-investing on this deal with a $30 billion energy company. And then on our side of the table, there was on the board, there was like me and Nick and 3 millionaires and a billionaire. We were lucky enough to co-invest. And I learned so much from this billionaire guy, who later donated $100 million to University of Calgary hospital to help with mental health, and he's just a high quality human. Okay, but like in our meetings, he was constantly stopping us when we were making decisions for the company and be like, "Hey, we need to talk about." So the 6 of us represented like 97% of the shares, and he's like, "Hey, we need to think about those 2 shareholders who aren't here." We're like, maybe they were like 1% of the company. I mean, like a rounding error, right?
Sure.
And he was constantly saying like, would they be happy for us to make this decision on their behalf? They're not here. We represent them. We can't just vote our own interest. Is this a good deal for them too?
Wow.
And just over and over and over. And it just like, it was like a mindset shift, for me. And I remember one day he took Nick and I, my brother, out for lunch. And so we used to have these board meetings at his apartment downtown Calgary. And one time, I thought this is super cool. He flew us on a private plane out to his yacht. It's like $20 million yacht in Vancouver Island. There's like a staff of 4 to take care of the 5 of us. And I was like, I felt like I was like, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous or something. I'd never been on a yacht, right?
Yeah.
And so we had our board meeting there and went halibut fishing for 3 days and stuff. I thought it was so cool. Okay, right. So I'm just like in awe of this guy who was a little older than my dad and had accomplished what I was trying to do in life and made a couple $1 billion, right? And he took Nick and I to lunch. It was funny because we just walked across the street to the YMCA. He bought us like sandwiches, but they were like on sliced bread sandwiches. I think they were like $6.25. Right?
I love it.
And he just said, like, I see what you guys are doing. I like we were like months into being on this board together, and he just wanted to do us a solid. And he took us over and said, like, I see how you guys are approaching. I see what you're doing, and I think you're great, and I just wanted to see if I could be helpful at all. And one of the pieces of advice he gave us is he said, always make sure that your investors make money. He said, don't worry if you make money. Just make sure your investors make money. And he had been an investment banker, and he went to a high net worth family out in Toronto and said, hey, I've got this great deal. If you did this and this, I think you're going to make this much money. And they worked out a compensation thing where he would do it for them, and he got a seventh of the upside. So they got their money back, and they got 6/7 of the upside. Okay?
Nice.
And then he worked really hard to find just a smoking good second deal and went back to them with it. And then went to a third and fourth. And he was just obsessed with how can I make these guys as much money as possible, right? And it got to the point where the father of this, super high net worth family, multi-billionaire family, just said to him, hey, just so you know, you can do any deal. Like, we're in. Whatever you want, we're in.
Wow.
Because they'd given the trust.
Yeah.
They had given the trust that they knew him. And they knew that he was more worried about their money than his own money. And by making a seventh of these deals that he kept bringing them, it made him a couple $2 billion. Because he did such good deals for them. Right? And I wish I could say that my investors had always made money. And, it's taking me years of studying Warren Buffett to, completely get out of speculation and into compound interest investing and things like this. But it's a different mindset. I mean, in the finance world, have you ever seen a movie where the investor was a good guy? No. It's all like Wall Street with Michael Douglas or, Josh Brolin, and they're these greedy SOBs, right? And it hasn't been my experience. The guys that I look up to the most have these mindsets of care and service to others, and the money they made was the byproduct. And I'm sure there's super shady billionaires that abuse people and do things wrong, but for whatever reason, it has been my experience to spend time with those ones.
Wow. Yeah, there's something that just resonates so and just rings true when you meet someone who gives and serves to that extent that it naturally inspires you to be like, wow, this person deeply cares. And there's there's almost that threshold that he passed with them where that trust was so high. Like we were talking about, they care more about my money than he does about his own. And when they became convinced of that, it was like a tipping point, it sounds like. And so,
yeah, it sounds so simple. It sounds so obvious. Everybody, there's nobody would disagree with that mentality if they had a microphone in front of them. Okay.
Sure.
But I'm I got into fundraising for investments at, I want to say age 22. I found $5 million for a Gwyneth Paltrow movie, like an indie movie. And then they ended up not taking the money. It was supposed to come from the Marriott family and blah, blah. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
But I think about since age 22, so I am 43 now, so 21 years there. I rarely come across people at the smaller net worths who had his level of commitment to not being worried about themselves making money. He was just so intent on, as long as the investor makes money, the whole rest of my life works. Even if this deal doesn't work for me, the whole rest of my life works because of the trust. And it was profound.
Yeah, it's like when you find someone who's that rare breed of and whatever helped cultivate that mentality. It's like if I can take a fraction of that and just go out to my friendship orchard and start applying that, and just be okay letting go of it's like that paradox a little bit. It's like one of my mentors a long time ago, Brandon Broadwater, compared it to a pendulum. And it's most people want the money, but wanting the money is not the thing that creates the money. You know, it's the, yeah, go for it.
Well, it's Derek Sivers, the guy who built the first online music store and sold it for like $20 million, like one of the best, most viewed TED Talks of all time. He's got this great book, and he talks about that you don't need to worry about money, you need to be worried about service, because money is a byproduct of service. And he says, funny enough, money is how you tell if you're providing a rare and valuable service. Because if it's not rare and valuable, you won't be getting much money back. And so he's like, if you're hyper-focused on how much rare and valuable service you can offer, money is the byproduct, but money is also your check. Of like, you might think you're offering this rare and valuable service, but if you're not getting the money for it, that's your feedback loop, right?
Exactly.
That the market doesn't agree with you, that your customers don't agree with you, right? It sounds so simple, but it requires long-term thinking. And humans are hardwired for survival. We're hardwired for how to survive tomorrow, not how to survive a decade from now, right? And taking the long-term trust over the short-term sales commission, it's not how regular humans come wired. It's not how you have kids. It's not how toddlers are wired. It's not like, do you know what I mean?
Oh, 100%.
And so it's like that reprogramming ourselves. It's tamping down our self-interest. It's having faith in the long-term view, even when you don't have your current situation figured out. That, in my observation, has done very well for people.
That's amazing. So, as I'm curious, like as far as your journey up to this point in time, 900 plus episodes later, what's been some of the fruit that's been born, that's been
sure.
impacting for you?
Financially, friendship-wise, what do you want?
Run me through the merry-go-round. Maybe let's start with relationships there, and then we can kind of move forward to like
sure. Okay. Here's a super fun one for me personally.
Sure.
Andy Horowitz. Okay. The guy is a producer on the Dark Knight Batman movie, Suicide Squad that made $750 million, American Hustle that got nominated for 10 Oscars. He did a $100 million special ops movie with Ben Affleck for Netflix called Triple Frontier. And like, I'm obsessed with the movies. Okay. So I'm like, oh, this guy's cool.
Yeah.
So we have one of our private parties, interview, like where I invite these podcast guests. Hey, do you want to come meet the other high profile people? And one of them, my friend Laura Walker Lee, is like, hey, I'm friends with Andy, who's done all this stuff. Do you want me to invite him? I was like, yes. Not only do I want you to invite him, I want to sit next to him at the dinner. Right?
Totally.
So we were lucky enough to get this like billionaire host to lend us his house and offer for us. So he was on one side and Andy's on the other, right? And we just like geeked out about movies and stuff, and ends up he's a couple of years younger than me and is like really into surfing and the whole skateboard culture, same as me. And we like hit it off in all these ways. We had such a good time. So then we invited him on the podcast, and Laura and I interview him, and then we decided to do a mini series together. We're doing this whole mini series on the show now called Hollywood Explained. And he's like,
so fun.
The episode a couple weeks ago, he's teaching me like how the decisions get made about directors and Christopher Nolan and this guy for that. And I'm not making any money off Andy. I don't think I'm going to make money off Andy. And I am so stoked to be friends with Andy. Like we text all the time when I go down there. When we go down there, we have lunch together. We like, I'm going to take him snowboarding when I'm going to try and talk him into coming up to Sundance Film Festival and take him backcountry snowmobiling on my snowmobiles.
So fun.
Like, at this point, no financial benefit. And I could care less because he's just like somebody who sees the world the same as me. He grew up listening to the same punk music and rap and metal, and we like the same kind of movies. And on our last episode, we just sat and geeked out about the movie The Killer, the new David Fincher one. And then afterwards, we like had like a 45-minute argument about like, not argument, but like discussion about how I think that movie needs to get remade, but with a hero that you can like. And we go back and forth, and you know what I mean? And like I read his movie scripts, and it's just like a meaningful friendship. Like that's who I want to be friends with in life because I want to make movies. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to snowboard and skateboard with my kids and my friends. And like, that's just who I want to hang out with. And yeah, he lives in LA and I live in Park City, but it's just a text away, you know?
100%.
Shane Snow, here's another one. I read his book, Smart Cuts, 20 times. The password to my computer was like, Smart Cuts 2016 or something, okay?
Sure.
And it was like, it's kind of about the 80-20 principle. And he says, a shortcut is when you skip unnecessary work, but it hurts someone else. A smart cut is when you skip unnecessary work, but it doesn't hurt anyone else. So he's like, do as many smart cuts as you can. The whole book is about lateral thinking and the 80-20 principle and how to take your success here and transfer it here. And it's just genius, how to get more faster, okay? Love it. Love the book. He wrote another bestseller called Dream Teams. He's got another book about storytelling. He built this company Contently to like $100 million. He's a journalist for Wired and Fast Company and like the kind of magazines that I like. And I get him on the show and he's like flattered that I think he's so cool. And we have like such a good conversation that I invite him back on the show. And then we keep coming back. We did this like whole series. We did like a mini series on intellectual humility. And then we text and email and I invite him to the party that we had in May in LA. And we stayed in touch. And we're like buddies. Like he comes here, we go to like when he's coming through Salt Lake, we go have a lunch or a dinner, and I bring my wife out, and I got to know his wife, who's like this great actress and film producer, and now they've got this new company called Showrunner that makes virtual production possible. They just won NAB this year, which is like the Oscars of camera equipment and stuff. Okay?
Wow.
And no money. He's not an investor. He's not a client. He's not anything like this. But he's a guy I can text and get advice. He's got 400,000 followers on LinkedIn. So when I want advice on LinkedIn, I mean, like, what would it cost to hire that guy as a consultant?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right? And he's like we have calls all the time, and he asks me advice on some of the financing structures he's looking at for movies and TV shows they're doing. I ask him advice on everything. He makes introductions to me. I make introductions for him. I can call him and say, hey, will you do a favor for this new person I'm trying to become friends with? And he'll take time out of his busy life. You know, he's a new dad. He's got multiple companies, all this stuff. And he'll take time out of his life to coach some stranger because I asked.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And it's just like a meaningful relationship. I mean, there's so many. Like, this is like almost bad to do this because I'm going to leave out so many people. Okay. Mel Torrey. Mel Torrey's got this $500 million AI robotics company. He's built for 23 years. He's got this great charity where they go down to Guatemala and teach people how to be entrepreneurs. He's just like a giver. He's friendly. He's genius. He's doing business with like the biggest brands in the world. They make everything from like tiny robots for the military to see if there's a bomb under the vehicle,
Wow.
to like self-driving lawnmowers, and then the largest robots in the world, these 400-ton mining trucks in Australia that carry 400 tons of mining stuff. And then they run the whole mine off of his AI system that they built. And like these guys get to like live in Perth 12 hours away. And so they can go home at night to their own families instead of living in the middle of the bush. And it's like almost like a video game running the biggest robots in the world, right? And he's just a great guy, but he's so generous. He's so friendly. And I get to ask advice for my businesses, and we hang out and we go to dinner and we text and call, and I put him on my clients' podcasts, and he is happy to meet my friends. And he came to our party last week in LA, and now I got to introduce him to this billionaire Paulo Tiramani who built Boxable with his son. And it's just like unfolding houses, right? And like, 2 weeks ago at the Formula One thing in Vegas, I got these $1,700 tickets for Paulo and his son for free to come to this F1 event. He couldn't come and said, hey, why don't you come to my party the next night during race night at his penthouse? I'm like, oh, billionaire invites you to his party, you go, right? And so then I invite Paulo to my party in LA, and I get to get Paulo and Mel to meet each other. Now Mel is flying down from Utah to Vegas to go tour Paulo's factories because Paulo's going to help him out thinking through some things, right?
Wow.
And it's just fun. And none of those people have hired me. None of those people have given me any money. But the friendship and the advice is like so meaningful to my life. Okay? Let's talk money though, because a lot of people think they've got enough friends. And they're not going to go through all this headache of having podcasts and parties or whatever their version of the friendship portrait is for more friendships because they think they got enough friends. But
Sure.
just the status upgrade. Remember I told you about my friend Lindsay Hadley,
Yes.
right? How she hangs out with, she has this party, like, there's this castle that Brad Pitt just bought for, like, well, I guess maybe I won't disclose this. Okay. I'll say this. There's this castle that Brad Pitt just bought in California that her billionaire client used to own. And she would have an event there with Gerard Butler for some charity and bring in some rich people, and they'd give to the charity, and everybody wins. Okay, right?
Totally.
And she would get so many clients from other people. So her website's Hadley Impact Consulting. You see, she did stuff with the royal family. She did stuff. She produced the first years of the Global Citizen Festival in New York that raised like $3 billion for charity. With, the bands are like Metallica and Neil Young and Foo Fighters. I mean, biggest bands in the world, right? And this idea of like people want access to her, or they trust her because, like, hey, if Kevin Bacon and these billionaires trust her, I probably can too, right?
100%.
Well, just me hanging out with these people on my podcast and parties, other people have become clients. So, if you listen to the end of the Bloomberg podcast called Switched On about renewable energy, we produced that year. Go to the episodes from last year that we produced. We produced that show for a number of years. It'll say at the end, produced by Greystoke, right? Okay.
Very cool.
Columbia University, $1.5 billion finance company. Most of these people were not somebody who was on my podcast and became a client, but it was because of the credibility of my podcast that they were willing to entertain becoming a client. And that got me in the door, and then we got to talk, and they decided to sign up, right? I do have a movie star as a client, okay? We make his podcast. He came on the show, and I was like, hey, man, you're super good at this. He's a stand-up comedian. He's made these directed movies that have made like $300 million, been in a bunch of movies. And he's like, yeah, I've been thinking about it, but it's a lot of work. I was like, well, why don't you let us do the work for you? So he hired us, and we make his show.
Nice.
That happens, but like, for my training and consulting business, like the conversations I get to have and like the coaching that Mel Torrey and Andy Horowitz and Shane Snow give to me and that I give to them, that type of work helped me get clients for our leadership training company. Like we got Google. Actually, they were on the show, and then they got me into their boss to do sales training, which didn't pan out, but then we ended up getting one of their executives who used to be a pro athlete on the coaching side. Okay. But the podcast got us in the door. But like Intel was not on the podcast at all, but it's because of the credibility here and previous client endorsements that we got Intel. U.S. Special Ops, a $16 billion bank, an $18 billion public company. They like sell lumber to home builders, stuff like this, right? And then like all the like startups and all the other clients who've gotten that business, like doing this work makes them see us in a different light and are willing to start the conversation. It doesn't close the sale for us, but you can just like see it on their face. They're like, well, what else do you do? And you start talking about it, and like the look on their face, like you can like literally see your status going up in their eyes by the look on their face. Our charity, Child Rescue, we've got family offices worth hundreds of millions of dollars that have decided to support us and actually host fundraisers for us and stuff like that.
Amazing.
And they were either had been a guest on the show or had found out about us because of the show or got introduced to us. And when they found out about the show, they took us more serious, and we got to have meetings. We built enough trust. They decided to support us. Right. I don't know. I don't know what else. Oh, we got multimillionaires to become investors in our investment fund. And it's a
right.
Like there's a number of factors. Like we had to have a good enough deal. We had to have relationships. They had to be able to do due diligence on us of like the other people they know what they think about us. But the show plays into it. Them knowing who we have access to, the kind of things we can get into, the fact that I just had the CEO of USA Olympic Skateboarding on, and the lends credibility that I want to do action sports Airbnbs. Anyways.
Wow.
Those are a few of the benefits.
It's so fun. Like I love both sides. Like one that like on the friendship side, you get to like I just love the way that you humanize these super high achievers.
I want to toss another one out.
Okay,
because my
go for
wife
it.
says, like, she's like, Jess, you come across as shallow when all you do is talk about billionaires. Okay. Asma Pygir. I love this woman. She's like, I think she might be the bravest person I've ever met. Okay. She's like,
Wow.
19, the Taliban takes over Kabul. Her and her 150 classmates are trying to escape. They're going back and forth on the buses at the airport. Taliban won't let them in. But like a week later, it basically has turned into a situation where it looks like the Taliban is now kidnapping these 150 girls and they're going to become forced brides or sold into sex slavery. And she, like, after being threatened by the Taliban, still made calls to her sister and U.S. officials and, like, got up and risked her life and took pictures. And she'd already been hit in the face with an AK-47 and told to be quiet. And she, like, not hyperbole, risked her life to save lives of these 150 classmates. The U.S. military forces the Taliban to let the buses come back and go to the airport. There's still 3 girls missing. And nobody wants to hear about it. Everybody's just so glad after the sleep-deprived week to be there. She's like, nope, I can't let it slide. So she goes back, and they pressure this U.S. Army captain to go pressure the Taliban and get the last 3 classmates back. And they all get on planes and get out of Afghanistan. And so we helped, like, raise some money for her. We helped raise some money for her scholarship last year because she's in America now. And, you know, like, Child Rescue is going to give her an award this year. I think, like, I don't know, Woman of the Year award or something. I haven't figured out exactly what it's going to be called.
Sure.
To just say, like, her preventing 150 young women from being trafficked and exploited is something to be celebrated. And
Absolutely.
and I'm, like, going to try and raise more money for her scholarship this year and try and get, like, other CEOs who want to hire her to give, like, speeches to their companies and just, like, help her make some money, right? And I'm not expecting any money out of Asma Pygir. I'm not expecting a referral. do you know what I mean?
Totally.
But I feel so lucky to hang out with someone like that. Like, she sounds like the hero stories from World War II when Nazis are, like, you hear her stories about Taliban going door to door and just shooting people. I mean, it just sounds exactly like the Nazis in World War II. Okay. And she's like, she's the kind of person people are going to make movies about 25 years from now, you know, like
100%.
And I'm so stoked to be her friend, you know?
Totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, it's like there's something that runs a lot deeper than and I love seeing the spectrum between the relationships. Some you've described that are just super fun people to hang out, but other people now on this spectrum where it's like mission, impact, like how it's...
Yeah, like I'm a busy guy. I'm running multiple companies and the charity, and I'm a father of 4, and I'm a church guy, and I want to go snowboarding. Like, I'm a busy guy, right?
Totally.
And I listen to 2 to 4 audiobooks a week, and I'm right. But, like, it's really easy for people to get on my calendar if they're doing, like, nonprofit work. Like, I've got all these texting buddies that are, like, trying to get their nonprofit going or trying to grow their nonprofit, and I'm calling in favors for them, and I'm giving them free consulting. You know, when I used to do CEO coaching, I charged like $500 an hour, right? And I'm too busy with the investment fund, so I don't really do that anymore. But I'm giving free consulting hours to these people who are trying to make life better for other humans, right? And it just makes me feel good. I don't make any money, but man, does it feel good to feel like maybe life won't be quite so frustrating for them now.
And I think that's a beautiful place to really end off as that fulfillment piece of it, because we can pursue the money and feel totally unfulfilled, but I love how both your nurturing of the relationships and how the podcast has been a vehicle to be able to make these introductions has allowed you to find lots of fulfillment in a variety of different ways. And I don't know if those paradigm shifts happened over time. You're like, wow, this is happening right now. Like, I remember listening to your episode with Chris Lockhead, and it kind of turned into an interview at one point, and then you're like, so what are your thoughts about this idea that I have? And I was like, this is so fun. This is so fun to watch basically a consulting session happen for an idea that you're seriously considering, and you guys are just like having a blast together. And I was like, this is so fun. This is so I've really enjoyed this time together, Jess, and it's been just an absolute treat to get to spend it with you. So that's all I've got.
Okay, great. Well, can I leave people a couple of book recommendations?
Absolutely, please.
So Clayton Christensen, the Harvard Business School professor who wrote The Invader's Dilemma and won the Thinkers 50 more than anyone else, I think, in the world. His book, How Will You Measure Your Life, was awesome. And it helped me realize like some of the things that I was optimizing for my own ambition and maybe neglecting fatherhood, husbandhood, personal friendships, things like that. It was just like a great reset for me. And like it's another lens to see life through other than just the one that the business press is always telling us about. One of the most influential books of all time for me is The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch. Just fundamentally changed my life. And one just like it that I listen to on repeat. Basically every week I listen to part of The One Thing by the billionaire Gary Keller, who built Keller Williams to be the biggest real estate agency in the world. Because I have shiny penny syndrome. Like I want to do everything. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. We should do that too. But it's like, no, the less things I do, the more money I make. Right. And it's just like, it's so good to like constantly refocus on like, okay, but what's the one thing I could do next? Like, what's the next domino? What's the one thing that could make everything else easier or relevant? Like, I really need that reminder. Then Bonds That Make Us Free by Terry Warner. Again, out of maybe 1,000, somewhere in the 900,000 plus books on business, philosophy, investing stuff. This is, again, top 2, top 3 book of all of those that genuinely changed my life, fixed my marriage, helped me be a better boss. I mean, so many things. Bonds That Make Us Free. It's based on this Austrian philosopher from 100 years ago, Martin Buber, that says our biggest problems in life are not what we said or did. Those people problems are how we were thinking about people when we said it or did it. And Terry went on to found the Arbinger Institute, and they've got all these great books and stuff, but that one. And then instead of taking drugs like Xanax or things for my anxiety as an entrepreneur, what I do is I've got Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle Is the Way.
Oh, I love that one.
And I just listen to a little bit of it most days of my life. And it helps me get my game face on of like, oh, there's other people that faced a worse problem than this. And they didn't have to change their circumstances to change their emotions. They changed their perspective to change their emotions. And that's something that's within my power. There's so many things outside of my power. But what's in my power is to outthink the situation and gain a new perspective, look at this from a different angle. I was really getting into the Stoics from James Stockdale. Stockdale's Paradox in the Good to Great book by Jim Collins.
Yes.
I ended up reading Jim Stockdale's books, which are so good. Like, Thoughts of a Philosophical Fighter Pilot and these ones. And then when Ryan Holiday stuff came out, it was just like even better, more current for me. And, like one of my very favorite things, I think it came from like the Ryan Holiday's email, The Daily Stoic or something like that.
Yes.
It's this quote by Epictetus where he says that your trials in life, these hard things you're up against, are not something to be regretted or worried about. Like what that means is that think about God like your wrestling coach. And he has just decided that you're ready for a harder opponent. And he wants to give you harder and harder opponents so you can get better.
I love this.
So you're not being persecuted. This is actually like a compliment. Like if
You're
you
ready.
got this wrestler to wrestle, it's because God thinks you can handle it. So you could almost like take it as a compliment. Like, well, even though I don't think I've got this, God thinks I've got this. This is I'm adding to Epictetus here, right?
Yeah.
But like, I would not have got that quote without Ryan Holiday. And like, it means a lot to me. And it's like, entrepreneurship and investing are so full of uncertainty and problems and headaches and, skip the Zoloft. Just read The Obstacle Is the Way every day.
I love it. And I think it's like a super fun way to come full circle back to when I first met you and the stack of books was there. I've got my virtual stack of books.
Okay. If you read those, I will buy you lunch again.
Yes.
Next time I'm up at my mom's in Canada, in Raymond. I'll come out to Carson, buy you lunch.
I'm in, man. I'm in.
Hey, thanks for doing this. This is super fun.
So much fun. Thanks, Jess.
Okay. Bye, everyone.